Good afternoon. Thank you for joining our Tuesday webinar. I'm Yomika Bennett, Executive Director of the New York Charter Schools Association. I am joined today by Susie Carello, Executive Director of the SUNY Charter Schools Institute, David Frank, Executive Director of the Charter Schools Office at NYSED, Angeli Matos, Executive Director, Policy and Operations at New York City Department of Education, Aaron Cochran, Managing Director in the same office, Lori Hazley, Senior Director, Charter Authorizing and Accountability at New York City DOE, and Corey Callahan from the New York City Charter Center. Today we'll follow our usual format. We'll hear some updates from our authorizers, field some questions, and then we'll take questions from the Q&A before turning to New York City DOE. I want to remind everyone about our Thursday Deep Dive webinar, July 30th, that's this Thursday, which will focus on human resource matters for reopening and feature our guest Amy Bess, partner and shareholder at Vedder Price, who has more than 15 years experience as employment counsel. And then Tuesday on August 4th, our next weekly webinar will focus on transportation issues with staff from SED. On August 6th, our next conversation in the Race, Justice, Equity series will feature educators of color in discussion on race, teaching, and anti-racism. As you are all keenly aware, reopening plans are due this Friday, July 31st, so without further delay, we're going to check in with our authorizers and get to the Q&A. Susie, Lori, and David, thank you for joining us again. It's always good to have you answering questions and keeping us updated. Lori, we will start with you. Do you have any updates you want to share with us today?
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'll keep this brief. To New York City Department of Education authorized charter schools going through renewal. I sent out guidance for your renewal applications. I know you are focusing on reopening plans. I don't expect to hear from you on these at this point, but look forward to talking to you about those next week. And then just an advance heads up to everybody, I may need to drop off of this call due to some volatile toddlers over here, so I will apologize in advance for that. And that's it.
All right, great, thank you. No apologies, we love toddlers, right? Susie, hi, how are you? Do you want to provide an update for us today?
Hi, everyone. Sure. I'll echo it. I suppose it's that season that you should have or will be soon, if you are a SUNY authorized charter school up for renewal this year, getting an email from the fabulous Mike Lazinski and the valuability team at the Institute, announcing dates and times for a webinar that will kind of move the ball forward, let you know a little bit about what we're thinking, and give an opportunity for you to make us smarter about all of the challenges that you are facing this fall, in addition to it being a year where you are up for renewal. So our thanks in advance for that. I think the other, little fun news that we became aware of today is that there will be a soft rollout tomorrow of the Credo data from the survey that you all did. And I think there's already plans afoot. Maybe David or Yumika can say more about what that will be, because Jeff Wasbus from our team is going to join that along with the Credo team. But it's really, we got a little soup of preview from the folks at Credo about it. And it's kind of amazing, all of the things that you were able to do, and how even with the expanding human services work that every school and every teacher took on, that the focus was so much on keeping instruction going. And we all know there was a hit to the amount of time you could devote to instruction, but the prioritization of that was incredibly heartening to see. So lots of really cool information coming out, and then you can talk to all the smarty pants people that can tell us even more when Anna gets that rolling for us. So I will also echo that the State Department of Health really wants each school to submit their thinking about reopening plans on July 31st. Again, my apologies to our school. We had some document problems, but that should have been solved. If you have not received an email from us that kind of says what we are looking for, we again have pushed our request out until August 14th. And if you haven't received an email, please reach out to me, because we want to make sure that you feel like you are fully informed. That's all I have.
All right, great. Thank you. Hi, David. Welcome. Do you have an update for us today?
Hi, Omika. Always a pleasure to be here in such good company. Um, the information on Credo, Anna posted in the chat, so take a look. We're excited to continue those conversations. We're also glad that that so many of the schools participated in having conversations with Mackie. They were just Mackie Raymond from Credo, I should say. They were just so impressed with the high turnout, and the first thing they asked me was, "How do you get such high turnout?" And we just say we all three authorizers have good relationships with our schools. And I think, we want to thank you for making that study, which is really unique across the country, possible. And I think it's really going to highlight the strong work that all of our schools did in the face of adversity this spring and will continue to do in the fall. Everything I'm going to say is actually summarized in our handy dandy newsletter that we send out to Board of Regents authorized charter schools. It's not that fancy, but if you are interested, we keep all of them in the archive in the link. But reopening plans, as Susie mentioned, are due on the 31st of this month. That's Friday. Annual reports are due through the SED portal on the 3rd of August. For Board of Regents authorized charter schools, renewal applications are due on the 14th of August. We also, in partnership with the other authorizers, but in particularly with SUNY and the fantastic fiscal team they have there, we put out draft ESSA fiscal transparency guidance. So thank you, Susie, for that, and especially to Barbara Achenauer, who is just a font of fiscal information. They do great work, and her team as well. But that's up on our website, and we're looking for public comment also by the 14th of August, and I'll put the link to that guidance, the draft guidance, in the chat as well. We're keeping an eye on what's happening in Washington as well as across the state. So while we don't have any information right now on what the governor will announce in the first week of August, we do know that down in DC, as part of the HEALS Act, which is it's the CARES Act 2.0, which is that large federal stimulus package. In the version that was passed in the Senate yesterday, it actually included the ability of states to request an extended testing waiver through the 2020-21 school year. So we're not sure if that'll pass the House, and we're certainly not sure if the president will sign it, but that may have ramifications for schools as well, in addition to the stimulus money that you might get personally. Unfortunately, there's no stimulus money in there for the states, which is something that Governor Cuomo was not too pleased about. But we will continue to monitor that. Otherwise, like Susie and Lori, I look forward to taking your questions.
All right, great, thank you. And for everyone who's on the phone and can't see the chat, I just wanted to let you know that on August 13th, we will be hosting our deep dive webinar, our Thursday conversation, which will feature SED, SUNY, and Mackie Raymond from Credo, discussing the survey and other things. Stay tuned, August 30th. Tune into our webinar, but you'll see an email on that soon. All right, so now we'll move to questions. We'll start with a couple of questions on facilities that we received during the prior webinars, but we didn't get to them. So the first question is there a general platform that you might be aware of that schools are using in order to remain fully remote? Are you aware of anything that schools are using that you want to discuss? And I'll just take that from anybody who has an answer to that question or wants to opine. And we'll start with anybody who raises their hand. Susie, David, Lori.
I don't have an exhaustive list or a favorite item, but there are a lot of them out there. So folks are using Zoom or something called Blue Jeans and Google Classroom. And I think there are a lot of options. And I'm kind of wondering, based on the question, if one of the things we might want to do is just have an opportunity for each entity that's using one thing or another to kind of share out why they picked it, or they changed to something new, or they're sticking with something else. I've gotten this question a lot. It's interesting. And I don't really have any information on why folks are picking the particular packages that they are. So maybe we could create a share group together.
We'll take you up on that.
Yeah, and we did launch a Google Doc where people could enter the platforms that they were using. We honestly haven't looked back at it in the past few weeks, and so, but that was the idea, Susie, is like what platform are people using? What experiences are they having with it? Are they using multiple platforms? Like I know a lot of people used Epic through the spring because they had some, like lots of people were throwing a lot of freebies out there when we all thought this was going to last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, 2 months. And I think that has shifted a lot. And so I think value proposition has changed a lot from what the calculations people were doing in March and April.
The best advice that I've heard is keep it simple. That was actually, Success Academy said that very early on, and I wholeheartedly agree, both from the school's point of view as well as for us authorizers.
Sounds like good advice. Okay, Lori, I want to just check in with you before I move on to the next question. Do you want to add something to that?
No, thank you. I don't have anything to add at this time.
Okay, thanks. All right, so next question we have is there guidance on taking classes to places like the park as an outdoor class? So there's been a lot of questions on outdoor spaces. Can we use them? Can we not use them? What are the guidelines? Do you have any advice or thoughts on this? David, I saw you nodding. We'll start with you.
I think it's a great idea. I think as long as you have a plan for the safety of your students and you have permission to use that space, certainly think outside the box. Putting up a tent or going to a park not only can present a great alternative and ensure the health and safety of students, but it might also be a nice teachable moment, especially for experiential learning and bringing the classroom out into the community. So I think schools should use their considerable autonomy to be innovative and think about using alternative space like their cafeterias and gyms and parking lots and playground spaces and public parks and maybe even reaching out to organizations in your communities that might be able to help you out. I know, for example, for a while, I don't think they do it anymore, but Brooklyn Urban Garden Charter School used to partner with Greenwood Cemetery, and they used to do some classes out there in the cemetery, which was right next to the school. But for those of you who know, there's a lot of history there and a lot of famous people. But that's a great idea, Yumika.
Great, thank you. Susie, do you want to respond?
I'll channel my best inner Ralph Rossi to say that as you are moving with children to different locations, and I think there's a lot of outdoor learning opportunities. As a Project Wild, Project Learning certified teacher quite a few years ago, there's a lot of great outdoor real strong academics you can put in place. Just be thoughtful about, kind of moving your kids, the movement of your kids, and how you're, how you're making sure that you keep them together, et cetera. And if you've got specific questions about what you have planned, feel free to reach out to either Ralph or Carrie at the Institute, and they can help you think through those things.
All right, great. And Lori, I'm going to ask you if you have an opinion on this.
I would definitely agree with what David and Susie, with what they've said.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, and so one more question on facilities. This comes up a lot. Can schools use polycarbonate barriers in classroom, on desks, et cetera? So this is the This is the plexiglass question. In or out, yes or no? So, and Lori, we'll start with you this time, and then we'll go to Susie and David. Thanks.
Yumika, I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question?
So the question is, can schools use polycarbonate barriers in the classroom? This is a plexiglass question that comes up often.
I do believe that they can. I know that David had flagged last time an issue that on another material that's flammable and not allowed to be used, but I do believe that that material can be used.
Yeah, plexiglass is a highly flammable substance, and I did follow up because there was some conflicting information, but in the document where it refers to plexiglass, I think that they were referring to a generic term for plastic dividers. I'm not a chemical engineer, but yeah, I couldn't tell you what the difference is between plexiglass and polycarbonate. However, the plexiglass is highly flammable and should not be used. It can be used in very limited quantities. However, I think the best rule of thumb is not to use it. Schools should use polycarbonate, which unfortunately is more expensive, but fortunately is not combustible and will not lead to a potentially terrible situation. That's something that you can also reach out to the State Education Department Facilities Office about, and I'll get their email address. But good rule of thumb: don't have highly flammable substances in your school.
All right, great. And I'm just going to repeat that just so everybody's clear. Polycarbonate is okay to use in schools. Plexiglass, another name for material that's similar to but not polycarbonate, is highly flammable and should be avoided. So polycarbonate, yes. All right. So a lot of schools have questions about nurses. Can either of you, Susie or David, provide any updates on the school nurse requirement? As a COVID-related responsibility, there's a lot of angst out there among schools about nursing or nurses. Do you have any comments on that at all?
I don't at this time. We have had folks ask us this same question, and we are trying to get as much clarity as we can, but it may be that New York City DOE or David has a better perspective on it.
We've always maintained that charter schools need to ensure that they have a nursing plan, whether or not that's through the district, or if unfortunately they're not able to get nursing services through the district, they make their own arrangements. Hopefully schools will be able to work with districts, but if not, we would be looking to make sure that there is some plan. But like always, there's flexibility. So for example, if there is a charter school next door to you or down the street, there might be an opportunity for some collaboration. Similarly, how can you potentially partner with other district schools, I should say, that are in your vicinity as well? But we certainly don't want any schools opening up that are providing in-person instruction that don't have a nurse available.
If I could just weigh in briefly with the I won't assume what David and Susie can't say, but the state law requiring districts to provide nursing services to charters does not require a 100% in-person full-time nurse for every charter facility every day. And certainly, as some questions in the Q&A are showing, and as other folks have experienced, districts are experiencing nursing shortages. And so my personal recommendation and the association's recommendation would be to put in writing your request to the district for a full-time nurse for every one of your locations for every day, citing all of the needs that all of you are, or full-time to the extent that you will have students in the building to cover all of the hours that you anticipate having students in the building. But you should make a plan assuming that that will not happen. And that is ultimately your responsibility even aside from the district's obligation to provide those services, because if they are unable to provide those services even to their own schools, it's not realistic that they're going to provide them to charter. So maybe as a long coda to David's response, you should have a plan. And right at this moment, I would not presume that it is going to be that the district is going to provide services above and beyond their minimum obligation, and they may even struggle to meet their minimum obligation, which you should get in writing. Get that in writing.
Great.
There was a question about the polycarbonate in the chat, and do you mind if I just expand upon it a little bit?
Go ahead, sure, yes.
Thank you. So having polycarbonate, it does not, it's not a substitute for PPE and social distancing. Just imagine a student has a polycarbonate shield in front of them and they sit back and they sneeze, and then there goes all of the particulate. Similarly, it's the same reason why just a face shield is not sufficient. You need a face shield and a mask. Because let's say you have a teacher wearing a face shield and they're helping a student and the teacher sneezes, well, all that particulate goes down. Certainly a polycarbonate barrier is helpful, but it doesn't necessarily lead to the same amount of protection as a mask would. Masks are certainly, the 6 feet of distance and or the mask are definitely the gold standard.
All right, great advice. Thank you.
And I hope everyone appreciated my my demonstration there.
I liked it. Okay, so we're going to go now to a question that about the plans themselves. So some schools apparently in some districts are planning to submit 3 plans, one for in-person instruction, one for remote instruction, and one for hybrid instruction. It's my understanding that schools should submit one plan, right, that includes how they intend to operate, including all of those various modes of instruction. Is that correct, or does that need some clarification? Can you, both of you, either of you shed some light on submission, and then if you do, talk about the protocol and practice for submitting them? We get a lot of questions, too, on how do we submit and where does it go? So if you could just run through that.
Sure. The DOH kind of New York forward plan that the governor spoke about a couple of weeks ago is due to the New York Forward DOH portal. And we have links to that on the Institute's website. I think that's the top link in terms of what is due to schools. And so first and foremost, answer those set of questions. With regard to our plans, if what we have asked for, if the school, in fact, if you have in fact done a kind of a 3 scenario plan that you're looking to use as you must make decision as you meet decision points, then we would be thrilled to have all of them. And if you think, as a number of you kind of indicated to me, that you will be starting the school year likely remote, whether that's because you may be co-located and not have access to facilities or for other reasons, that you might start with your fully remote plan in August and then shift to bricks and mortar when the bricks and mortar piece becomes available. Similarly, I've said for a while, I think that's really smart planning to do a 3 scenario plan, because should the infection rates rise at some point during the school year, you would then have a plan available to work with in terms of making a more informed shift later in the year. So July 31st, everyone's plans due through the portal to New York Department of Health, New York Forward. And then for the SUNY authorized schools, we've asked for August 14th. And given what we know now, if you have kind of 3 scenario plans, we would love to see that. And that's the piece where I said, if there's any confusion, please do reach out to me. And of course, I'll wrap that in the caveat of, I don't know what the governor's going to have to say next week. So it may be that some of those plans will need a little adjustment based on what they tell us.
Okay, great. Thank you. David, do you want to add anything to that?
So the situation is rapidly evolving, and we encourage schools to have alternatives. So to be thoughtful about, well, if we want to have in-person instruction, but that might change. So what would we do if we need to go remote? Certainly that's something to think about. However, we don't want these plans that you're submitting now to, one, we don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And so submit what you have, what your best thinking is today. But we also don't want these plans to be set in stone. And Renee actually, or someone asked that in the Q&A. So these plans are evolving, they're changing. That's why we're asking for a link and not for a hard plan. We expect that as conditions change, your plans might change. We hope, because we know how much time and effort you're putting into them, we hope that they're not changing dramatically, but the situation's going to evolve. We don't know what will happen next week, let alone next month or in 5, 6, 7 months from now. So unfortunately or fortunately, we're going to have to be flexible. But I think that that's one of the big strengths of the charter sector, is that you can more easily pivot, but you're going to have to bear with us and the situation for the foreseeable future, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. So on that note, we're going to do a snap poll now on the webinar, just following up on plans. If everyone who's on the webinar right now can take a moment to respond, you'll see the poll come up. It's a quick, short poll. If you take some time to do that. In the meantime, while you answer those questions, we will move on to the Q&A. Following the Q&A, we'll move to New York City-related questions. Before we wrap or release the results of the poll, and the questions, again, on the poll relate to plans for instruction, plans in-person, remote, hybrid, per grades. All right, and so Anna, I'll turn it over to you for the Q&A.
All right, thanks. And I just want to highlight that a lot of folks' questions that have been submitted in the Q&A today and in the past, I and other panelists have been trying to field directly by typing. What I've realized, and we're months into this, so I'm still learning Zoom, is that sometimes there's a little bit of a back and forth and it doesn't pop the question up again. And so if one of us responds to your question and it doesn't answer your question, enter a new question in the Q&A. That's the easiest way to make sure that everyone sees it. So diving in to a couple of questions related to scheduling and sort of student attendance and participation. So if students are not physically in school, so Joelle is asking, they have a teacher planning day each week, but on that day there's virtual instructions for students, that can count as a school day and a day of attendance if they have evidence of engagement. And that's similar to a question that someone else asked in terms of how to submit virtual attendance or how to count virtual attendance as FTEs. So I think that's a question for everyone in terms of if a school is providing a hybrid instruction in whatever format, how you would advise they are counting attendance for the purposes in particular of billing, enrollment, and considering a student in good standing.
So the important thing to do is make sure that you have a definition of attendance, that you have a policy. I will say, if you look at like the California Charter School Association actually put out a model attendance policy. So it's, to Anna, hint, hint, you might want to think about that, but you always have to weigh autonomy in there, but have a plan. The state education department and the regents actually passed some regulations regarding this, that instructional time is pretty flexible. And as long as students are engaged in academic work, that would count. So there's no dichotomy between synchronous and asynchronous in live or not or pre-recorded instruction. Certainly when students are doing group work, when students are working on projects, when students are otherwise engaged with your materials, that would count as instructional time. But definitely have a policy.
Same would be true for the Institute, right? That's really great advice. We started saying this, by the way. The Credo survey shows that you did an extraordinary job actually of taking attendance, and that's great, especially because there's a few kind of national studies that indicate maybe that your district brethren did not do as well at that. So keep attendance, figure out how you're going to keep attendance and engagement information, whether that is that the children on the day that they are completing projects synchronously are, required to submit something to you, whether it be project-based or if they're, graphing and doing statistical manipulations on the number of steps they've taken around the apartment building or around the park or anywhere else. That is legitimate work time on the part of a child where they are engaged in good intellectual pursuits. So make sure that you do give yourself credit for that.
That's great. And I would only add that our recommendation has also been that if you are asking or expecting any cohort of students to be in person and there's a group of families who opt out, to have something in writing about their understanding about what full participation looks like in whatever remote offering you're providing them. So not entirely different, but different only in the sense that it is not necessarily a remote option that you are coordinating so much as one that they are requesting. All right, so two last questions before we turn it over to New York City topics. One is about contact tracing. So a couple questions here. And David, it looks like you wanted to put your hand up and field them. So this question about if a student is sent home with symptoms, or so how should schools determine who should be excluded from school based on either symptoms or contact tracing? And this question about whether or not schools are actually eligible to participate in contact tracing based on HIPAA concerns. Thoughts?
The first thing I would say, and I'll put the link in the chat, there was a great New York Times op-ed all about this morning. I was going to send it around to the sector on the charter school email listserv, but the title of the op-ed isn't too great. So I'm like, I'm not going to send it around, but I'll talk about it here. So I definitely would read that article, and it gives some good resources. The SED guidance that our friends at Community Roots were mentioning, it says that schools should not try to determine who's to be excluded from school based on contact without guidance and direction from the local Department of Health. That does not mean that if a student is sent home with symptoms that you have to wait to hear from the DOH before they close a classroom or a pod. Rather, what that means is you should work with your local Department of Health and seek guidance on what your protocol is in case a student or a teacher gets sick. Now, as Lisa from New Dawn said, also in the Q&A, the Department of Health webinar might have left people with more questions than they had going into it. And I think that's just the nature of the pandemic that we have right now. We don't have that many answers. However, develop a protocol using some of the resources in that New York Times article, which a lot of them are from the Center for Disease Control. Maybe reach out to your local Department of Health to run it by them, and and that covers your bases there. But certainly you need to develop a policy in your reopening guidelines that would address some of these tricky situations. I think that in itself is one reason why you need to have a strong remote instructional plan, because you don't know when you're going to need to go out, whether it's one class, whether it's one pod, whether it's the whole school. Certainly, there's just too many unknowns. So I would encourage you to think about some remote options, even if your school is going fully in person. Just food for thought. And again, I cannot recommend that New York Times article enough. It was very informative for me, although it certainly doesn't answer all the questions. Actually, it was also written by an economist, not a public health expert, but it's still pretty good.
Susie, Lori, anything to add? All right, last one. So if a school, and I apologize because this has come up a couple of times on the past couple of webinars and we haven't really gotten to it. So if a school is looking to use space that is not in its normal footprint, so whether it's a community organization, and I want to sort of add a wrinkle here, whether that is for direct traditional instruction or for hybrid remote instruction. So the place where charter parents could send their kid, even if it is not direct instruction by a teacher, what information do you all need as authorizers? What information needs to be in the plan by Friday? And if not all information is known by Friday, how should schools proceed as they're working to make some of these new and creative relationships?
So I'm not sure, other than submitting a subsequent plan or updating your existing plan, if you do expand your footprint for facilities. Let me circle back around and see if I can dig up any clear answers on that. But we've had this question a few times, and again, feel free to call the Institute's legal team and they'll be happy to walk you through that. David's already posted the link to the facilities, folks. There are some restrictions associated with facilities that you use for school, and whether or not the space that you are expanding in has a C of O that allows you to conduct school there, versus the kind of facilities, clearances and regulations that you need to have if you are giving the second scenario that Anna talked about. If it is a space where parents who need a place for their child to be, but who may attend remotely, might have another adult that is not necessarily a teacher from the school conducting classwork. There's also some all of those folks have to have criminal background checks and fingerprints because utmost safety. We know you know this. So it may depend on the particular facility that your partners are offering as an opportunity to expand your footprint. And so as soon as you know what that will look like, if you're a SUNY authorized school, you should reach out to us and we'll try to help you navigate that as quickly and proficiently as possible.
I would agree. Certainly talk to us as you're thinking through these things. Reach out to your school's liaison and we can help you walk through any potential changes that might take place. I would just urge you to talk to us before you actually make those changes or implement them so we can make sure you stay in compliance with your charter. And we always, it's true. We always love to hear from our schools and wrestle through these problems of practice, but we want all of our schools to be community focused and to have connections with CBOs. And as schools, you're the experts in academics and teaching and learning in math and ELA. We want you to partner with the experts in delivering food to students, to delivering social emotional supports, et cetera, et cetera. And so reaching out to CBOs is a great idea.
Great, thanks. So I'll hand it over to Corey and Anjali, and just with the last note that we'll share out the results of the SNAP poll in the final moments of the call before 5 o'clock.
Great, thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Sorry, it's only Tuesday and it's been a long week for many of you as well, I know. So I just want to start with a couple of announcements to get things started, and then I believe I'm joined with Anjali. So we will get some questions going. A lot of you have been referencing the DOH-MH call that we had on Friday with DOE. I know there were a lot of questions. As David said, these things lead to more questions. I also know that the information that a lot of you are seeking for your plans that you're submitting on Friday, everything has not been nicely tied up in terms of answers. So there are a couple things the Charter Center has been working on that we will be getting either tonight or first thing tomorrow morning that I wanted to let you know about. The first is we've gone through and kind of made a chart of all the areas of the DOH plan where we know that schools are either awaiting on information from NYC DOE, whether it's about school food, transportation, and then similarly with Department of Health, the contact tracing program in New York City, which is known as the track and trace, closure requirements, a lot of the DOH questions you're all asking. And we've kind of highlighted those and then provided you with language. If you would like to use it, you absolutely don't have to how to kind of respond to that in your response, knowing that this is placeholder, because as you all know, this information is, forthcoming, hopefully. To that end, we're also going to be hosting another Q&A session with the Department of Health and DOE this Friday at 1 p.m. So there will be another invite from the center where you can answer the survey. We have a lot of the questions that we didn't get to last time. As everyone knows, we went straight through question to question and we didn't get through everything. But please let me know if you have more questions. We are keeping a record of questions that we're seeing here in this webinar to add into the questions that we ask from DOH and also New York City DOE. So just all to come. I want you to know that we know there's more questions than answers at this point, but we'll continue to try and help facilitate getting you folks the answers you need, and also work to make sure that your plans are helpful. I will say that we've seen a bunch of plans. We've had a couple of New York City charters present plans. I think folks have been, trying to work around best they can, not having all the answers on all the specifics, but providing that everyone will be following, New York City DOH and the NYC track and trace program to the extent that these guidelines become clear. So just wanted to make sure everyone knows that's what's coming. The last thing I'm going to say is we are also working on a summary of the notes from that call that we will be sharing with you guys shortly as well. So all of that to come. With that, I'm going to say hello to Anjali. Good afternoon, and ask you to say, in addition to this 1 p.m. session that we're going to do with DOE on Friday, if you can just remind the sector of kind of all the different sessions your office is hosting for folks to be able to get information on a variety of different topics. And I know that you probably have some stuff to put in the chat as well, but as everyone knows, there's lots of information, lots of questions. And so what DOE has really done is tried to set up structured office hours based on different topics so you get access to the right people. So hello, Anjali.
Hi, Corey, and hi, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. All right, so I'm gonna jump in directly to reminders. So the first one that's coming up is our facilities office hours, where we're taking questions about DOE space allocations for next year. That's happening on Wednesdays from 11 to 11:30. I'm gonna put the information in the chat in a second. The second thing that's happening this week is special education office hours, and that's Thursday at 3. I'll also put that in the chat. And then lastly, we have reconciliation finance office hours, and that's happening on Thursday as well at 1 p.m. So I'm gonna put in the info in the chat along with the registration link so that you can register. Corey, I also do want to remind folks of 2 deadlines that are coming up this week. So the first one is actually one deadline this week. So the per pupil invoice number 2 is due this Friday, July 31st. We sent a reminder this yesterday. If you haven't submitted, please make sure that you do so. And last reminder is that the FY20 reconciliation is due on August 14th. That's all I got, Corey.
Okay. Other questions that we've gotten are the building councils. We know that schools have been encouraged to start meeting with their building councils if they're in co-located space. But as I believe we know from last week's facilities office hours, there is going to be a document that DOE is producing for building councils, and was just curious if you could give an ETA and when that will be available for schools in co-located.
Yes, so that's correct. So we are working on some guidelines for specifically around COVID-19 shared space and building movement. We held a few working groups with district principals and charter principals, and we got some really good feedback. Thank you for those that participated. And we're hoping to issue those guidelines later this week. Later this week, I'm going to say early next in case anything comes up.
Got it. And also I have to ask, as you know, have there been any updates on the DOE calendar?
No updates as of yet. This is a burning question. We're hoping to have an update in the next couple of weeks, Corey, after we submit the SED plan for the district.
I'm seeing a bunch of questions in the chat. Let me clarify. We will be sending out, the Charter Center will be sending out the documents I discussed at the beginning. They're not going to be in the chat. So everyone, they will come to you. I am sure everyone is on the Charter Center's list, or if you're not, please contact me and we'll make sure you are, but the documents will be coming out. So those are the forthcoming between tonight and tomorrow. I do have to ask Anjali, and this might just be another not sure, but any updates on busing?
No updates as of yet. So you know what I'll do, Corey, I do want to reiterate what we've said before, which is we are focused on this as a high priority for the department. In the meantime, we do encourage schools to work on a contingency plan in case in case we don't have bus service available.
Got it. And then can you speak about Metro cards? Because I know Metro cards is something that a lot of schools also rely on.
Absolutely. So Metro cards will be available for schools next year. I think there's a question around, if there's an issue with bus service, will the DOE provide Metro cards for parents? That's an open question that we're looking into. Erin, do you want to add anything here on the Metro cards front?
No, nothing to add on the Metro cards. I think we are just asking that schools, if you have not yet reached out to the Office of Pupil Transportation to request new OPT codes related to a moving site, we want you to do that as soon as possible so that the eligibility, any adjusting eligibility for new sites for Metro cards or for bus routes can be taken into consideration. But other than that, we do have a plan for the fall for Metro cards.
Great. Erin, can I ask you to just specify where who schools should email if they're moving, split siting, etc.?
Yes, so I think we have been in contact with most folks about moving and split sites. So hopefully we've already had a conversation about your certificate of occupancy and all that good stuff. But if you have not already been in touch with us, please email us at charterschools@schools.nyc.gov so we can start all of the conversations that.
Oh, I think we lost Erin.
Oh.
But I think we got all of the info we needed. So charterschools@schools.nyc.gov, send us an email if we haven't been in touch already.
Also, Anjali, in terms of nurses, I know we know that you are still working on it. I think schools, as you know, are particularly concerned if they can get the nurse back that they've had previously. A lot of schools have used the same nurse for many years. And then I see also a question in a chat about, is there a possibility of a school getting a health aide instead of a nurse?
Got it. So here's what I'll say. So for schools that had nurses in their buildings whether that was an inclusive nurse to your school or shared nurse in a DOE building. We are working very hard to ensure that those nurses can return to your school for next year. If you're a new school or an expanding school to a new site, we have, of course, if we're aware of this information, we have shared that data with our health team, and we'll be similarly working to ensure that we have a nurse in those buildings as well. But as we said before, we are facing a nurse shortage in the city. And so we can't confirm that you will have a nurse, but we are making our best efforts.
So any thoughts on the health aid? Or is that a question you could bring back to NYC DOH?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll bring that back.
Okay. And then the last question I see in the chat is school has reached out to OPT, but was told that they're not allowing adjustments to sessions and times based on where they're
Corey, you're fading out a little bit, Corey.
Oh.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. A school asked that they've reached out to OPT, but they are not, they were told by OPT that they're not allowing adjustments to session times and routing based on where the school left off in March. The school happens to be shifting their hours. How should a charter school go about making those changes?
Please escalate that issue to us at charter schools, at schools@nyc.gov, and we can raise this with our colleagues. We did have a deadline for updating your session times. I don't have it top of mind. Oh, Erin, I see you're back. Do you have that at top of mind, Erin, when that deadline was?
For the session times?
Yeah.
We have not yet asked for session time because we know so much is in flux, but it is on our radar clearly that schools may be using different hours or may have moved since last year. So it is on our radar. So definitely please reach out and we will escalate to OPT.
Great, thank you.
Got it. Okay, unless there's anything else, Anjali or Erin, I think that's all I've got.
I have just a quick reminder. I'll take 20 seconds. So just a reminder to all New York City charter schools that the deadline to submit your state's data through Eastern Suffolk BOCES is next Tuesday. By meeting that deadline, you will have an opportunity to actually see that data live in level 2, so you can make updates as needed. Data can be submitted after Tuesday, but you're submitting at your own risk. There may be errors. You may not be able to catch things before the warehouse closes. One specific plug I want to make is about the Regents waivers reporting. Charters are not used to reporting Regents data that flows automatically from ATS. So I just want to encourage you to pay particular attention to that reporting, because if the state does not have record of a waiver, the student did not receive one. So I'm sure you can think of all kinds of downstream implications for a student not having an expected Regents waiver. So we'll be sharing more this week, but just wanted to make sure that was on folks' radar.
David, you're muted.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough the importance of doing that. Failure to report that data will result in an incorrect graduation rate for your school that's publicly posted. So I urge all of the schools on the webinar to make sure that they're accurately reporting those waivers. Your students are owed it. They've gone through a lot, so let's make sure that they get credit for the work they're doing this academic year. It does not take very long at all to do.
Mm-hmm. And Erin, thank you, David, for adding. Erin, we're sending a reminder about this. Remind me.
Yes, so we are putting it into the C Weekly. We have been listing it as one of the state requirements for the past couple weeks, but we realized given that this is a new thing to be reporting Regents information, we're going to call it out in the C Weekly this week.
Great.
And just very quickly, Erin, they can report that through Eastern Suffolk?
Yes, that is being reported through Eastern Suffolk BOCES, and their fabulous support team is on call to help walk you through it.
And for upstate schools, you would report through your regional information center.
Great. That's all we got, Corey. Thank you.
Great. Turning it back over to you, Yumika.
Okay, thank you. So now we will release the results of the poll. We're going to drop those. Let's see. either in the chat or share them on a screen. All right, so here they are. We'll just hold this for a minute. What do we see here in terms of the polls? It looks like for elementary, most of the schools, 46% of the schools who participated and responded to the poll, most people, hybrid is the option most schools will use. The same thing is for middle school, hybrid, 36% of schools are hybrid. And then the same thing for high school, hybrid. Everyone who's on the webinar on video can see this. Fully remote for high school, 15%, 1% fully in person for high school, but we do have 63% of the people who responded for high school either not applicable to them or they don't have high school grades. But it looks like for all grades that the fully in-person option is the least likely for most schools. It's 4% for elementary, 1% for middle, and 1% for high school. So there you have it. Those are the results. We'll leave this up for a little bit. Anybody who wants to take pictures, screenshots, etc., that's what we have so far. I want to remind folks that when all of this started back in March and April, we set up a resource on our website for folks to share, schools to share amongst themselves best ideas, or best practices, questions, information, template sharing, etc. That resource still exists on our website. And I would like everyone to just remember that. If you want to share resources there, that's what it's for. Happy to have you do that. All right. Let it sit for a second. Those are the results of the poll. And they're asking we're having a request to put the results in the chat.
I don't think we can. I would say, look at the bottom of your screen, and if you're not looking at a screen, I don't know that it's going to be possible for you to see it, but I'm assuming if you're asking for it in the chat, you can see the screen. At the bottom of your screen, you should see participants, Q&A, and then directly to the right of Q&A, between Q&A and chat, is a polls link. And if you click that, it will pop the results up. Lujan, I'm seeing you're still having questions. I would just recommend email us directly and we'll figure out a way to get it to you.
All right, thank you, everyone. We will see you this Thursday, as a reminder, 4 p.m., where we will have Amy Best as our guest talking about HR issues. Until then, be well, be safe, send us any questions, and have a good night.
Bye, everyone.